Hello and welcome for yet another J Champions conference session. So today here I have a great pleasure to have two of my fellow Java champions here with me. It's Matt and it's Ray. So I'll start the introduction with Matt. So Matt Raible is a well-known figure in Java community and has been building web applications for most of his adult life. He's a web developer, Java champion, and a developer advocate for Okta. He's a frequent contributor to open source and a member of JHipster development team. So welcome, Matt. Now it's your turn, Ray, to get a short introduction. Ray, this is Ray Tsang. He's a developer advocate for Google Cloud Platform and the Java champion. Ray works with engineering and product teams to improve Java developer productivity on GCP, and he also helped Alphabet companies to migrate and adapt to cloud-native architecture. Apart from that, Ray enjoys traveling and adventures. It's really, really great to have both of you here today. And I'll let you do the introduction of your topic and of more about yourselves if you want to do that. So, welcome, guys, and take it away.
All right. So thank you for coming today. This talk is one that Ray and I put together last year, and we did a tour in the Rocky Mountains and did a bit of skiing, did a bit of talking about JHipster. And the reason that we wanted to do it is because JHipster has so many options that we figured we'd be fun to give the audience the choice on what they choose for a JHipster app. And then we'll deploy that to Google Cloud with Kubernetes. So I'll be a little heavier in the beginning, and Ray will do a lot of the Kubernetes stuff towards the end. We do want to warn you that this could be longer than an hour. When we did it back in-person times, it was about 90 minutes. So we will try to make it an hour, but you never know. And this is a very fluid presentation. So if we find issues, we might have to fix them during it, but a lot of live coding and hopefully a lot of fun.
One more note before I remove myself from the stream for now is that you can ask your questions in the chat, on the YouTube chat, whenever you want, whenever you feel like. I'll read them aloud to the speakers as soon as I get them, as soon as I get a chance to read them for Ray and Matt. All right, I'll mute myself now.
Thank you. So first of all, we wanted to introduce JHipster. If you haven't heard of JHipster, it started out as a project that allowed you to build a Spring backend and an Angular JS front end. So this is way back in 2013. And the original impetus was actually an Ant project that wanted to be able to run Node from Ant. So there's a lot of legacy here, and now it's really become much more. So it started out as just a Spring Boot and Angular generator. Like Spring Boot wasn't even there in the beginning, but they added it later. And that was kind of what people were happy about. But really, it became more of a platform because now you can add like CI/CD very easy with JHipster. You can go ahead and deploy to many different cloud platforms, and it's become an extremely popular open source project. So you can generate monoliths, microservices, gateways. You can even generate mobile apps. So it's pretty exciting there. And if you go to jhipster.tech, you can learn more about it. There's all the documentation and everything like that. And I wanted to point out that, in addition to these four that have been around for our logos for a while, we have a whole bunch of new ones. So on the left there's one for Micronaut, one for Quarkus now, as well as the three in the middle. So if you go to that JHipster artwork repo, you could add more or, add any comments about ones you'd like to see. So that's awesome. So this, like I said, is based on the Choose Your Own Adventure books that you might have read if you were a small child or even a middle schooler. I read them a lot, and I really enjoyed them because you choose an adventure, you make a choice, and then you see what happens. So that's what we're going to do today, and we'll see how it goes. You want to take this one, Ray?
Gotta unmute myself. Of course. Yeah, absolutely. As you know, there are so many different options in JHipster. You can pick and choose different, potentially even framework, different databases you want to use. In the Java world, do you want to use Maven or Gradle, and so on and so forth. this is really adventurous because we don't know what the audience will pick every single time that we give this talk. And somebody actually has done a study. You can see the link below it. At the time that they did the study, they found that there are 26,000 plus different combinations that you can potentially produce. I think this number probably went up just recently because we got even more options to choose from. So Matt, I'm not so certain that we can actually make something work today. What do you think?
Well, the interesting thing is we're going to try to use JHipster 7 beta. And so
Ooh,
there's a beta release right before Christmas, and and Ray and I have been doing a lot of testing, and we've found some issues, and we hope to be able to work around them if we
yeah.
encounter them. But a lot of it will be based on your choices. So if you make certain choices, we're confident there won't be issues. If you make other choices, then maybe there will be. So it's possible there'll be a couple dead ends, right? And that's what the Choose Your Own Adventure book used to have, is dead ends if you made the wrong choices.
Yeah. And in case it doesn't work, just remember you made the choices.
Not our fault.
All right. So I'm Ray. I'm a developer advocate at Google Cloud, and I also happen to helped create the first version of JHipster Kubernetes generator, the things that we will see later today. So in addition to generating the applications, JHipster can also help you generate Kubernetes deployment manifests. And there are many different type of support in this contribution, and it has grown a lot ever since with many other contributors. So you can find me on Twitter at Stalinism.
And I'm Matt Raible. I'm a hick from the sticks. I grew up in the backwoods of Montana with no electricity nor running water, and somehow I turned out to be a programmer. I've been a web framework enthusiast since 2003, 2002. I was part of the Struts project and then got into Spring MVC and obviously JavaScript framework since then. So work on JHipster. I do a lot of the OAuth implementation and make sure that works between various implementations. I like to ski, I like to raft, and big fan of Volkswagen. So you can find me on Twitter at mraible. And so what we'd like to do is we recognize there's a delay, right? We're talking in 20 seconds from now, you're going to see what we're talking about. So we'll pause on this slide for a bit. And what you can do is either hit that URL, that SurveyMonkey URL, or use your phone. The camera should be able to read that QR code. And this will take you to a survey that's going to ask you 8 questions. And those questions will determine the app we're going to develop. So we'll pause a bit here, but basically, our next slides we'll talk about the choices a bit. So as long as you get this link, then we should be good to go. And maybe we can copy and paste this into the YouTube chat so people can get it as we move on. So do you think I've paused enough? I'll have a drink of water. You'll notice I have a mason jar because I'm a hipster.
I just pasted a link into the YouTube chat.
All right, so we'll move on and people can answer the questions and we'll come back to them when we're ready to develop the app. So one of the choices we're not going to give you is whether you can use something other than Spring Boot. So with Spring Boot, it's really become the de facto standard for developing REST APIs in Java land, and so we kind of want to stick with that. We don't want to have too many variables. There is implementations for Quarkus and Micronaut, but we just want to stick with Spring Boot because we kind of know that area really well, and we won't have to reach for outside help if we encounter any issues. And part of the reason for that is if you look at Google Trends for Spring Boot, it's obviously way more popular than the other alternatives. Micronaut and Quarkus are pretty new, but MicroProfile has been out for a while, and still you can see people aren't really searching for that volume. And we see that on our blog as well at the Okta developer blog. If we do a Spring Boot or Spring Cloud post, they typically do very well. And if we do a Quarkus or Micronaut one, there's not quite as much traffic. I mean, part of that is because I've been in the Spring community for a while. And so if I write about Spring, then maybe people come for that. Versus if it's a Quarkus or a Micronaut person writing about it, they probably get lots of traffic. So that's just one thing to consider. The rest of the Java pack, if we just take Spring Boot out so we can see the rest, you'll see that Quarkus is definitely gaining steam over the others, but MicroProfile is still the standard that everyone's kind of implementing, and then Micronaut has been getting popular as well. So one of the things is monolith versus microservice architecture. So if you want to take this one, Ray.
Yep. So as you saw in the survey, one of the first question is what type of application do you want to build? Do you want to build a monolith or a microservice? JHipster supports both style of applications and it will generate both. However, when you're designing your system, you really need to think about when and why do you need to choose one architecture over the other. They both have pros and cons. And so, for example, for monolith, it's definitely maybe easier to maintain. You just need to have a single CI/CD pipeline, and you don't have to wait for the calls between different components because they're all going to be running the same JVM, for example. But obviously, the con will be that it may be slower to build and slower to deploy, and there's high coupling. And sometimes you might want to start with a monolith, right? I think most of the time, maybe that's what you want to do. And then really think about how do you want to decompose certain functionalities out into microservices. And JHipster can support that too. When you generate the application, you can choose to generate microservice architecture instead. Now, obviously, there's pros and cons, right? There's definitely smaller services, so you can have potentially a faster build. But now you have to potentially multiply everything because now you have so many services you have to maintain, you have to create, you have to manage, you have to operate, and that will bring some complexity and overhead as well. Okay, so make your choices wisely in the survey. But in monolith, sometimes I think people, say, "Oh, monolith is legacy," but it works. It works, and at least you only have, one single thing you have to deal with. If you go to microservices, and if you're not careful, uh, if you like the difficult stuff, then that's what you get. So, Matt, what do you think? Should we take a look at the survey result at the moment and see what people
Well,
choose?
let's talk a little bit about microservices versus monoliths first. I think this is a great quote from Kelsey Hightower. He says, monoliths are the future because the problem people are trying to solve with microservices doesn't really line up with reality. And a lot of what his post is about is people adopting microservices because of the buzzwords. And I think Ray and I have seen this when we did this presentation in person before. Like, people always chose microservices, even though they might not actually use them at their company. It's a skill that people want to develop so they can use them and get a better job, which is certainly admirable. But monoliths typically are revenue generating. So even though Ray called them legacy, revenue generating, kind of a cool thing. Companies really like that. The other thing that we asked you is Maven versus Gradle. So this can be a very controversial topic, but that'll be in there. And then Java, Kotlin, .NET, or Node. So we did put Java, Kotlin, and .NET in there. We didn't put Node in there because we weren't even going to try that. But in case you actually chose .NET, that's a dead end. So let's go to the survey results and
I think people
see.
chose .NET, so I guess we can stop the talk now.
Right, we could be done. So I got a different user here that's got the survey results. Let's hope there's at least a couple people watching, and we have some. All right, so the first question, monolith versus microservice. Looks like microservices is winning. Maven or Gradle? They'd like Gradle. Should we use Java, Kotlin, or .NET? So no .NET choosers. Yes. It is a Java conference, though, right? So we kind of expected that.
We're in the right place.
And we're glad you didn't choose Kotlin because there is Kotlin support. There's a blueprint for JHipster that supports Kotlin, but it hasn't been updated for the 7 beta yet. So we can still use 7 so far. Which authentication type should we choose? JWT session or OAuth and OpenID Connect. Okay. OAuth is winning that one. Database. Oh, I messed up the question. Right? Everyone chose the same thing. So
yes, we will have a database.
Ray likes to choose the databases anyway, so we'll let him do that part. Should we use Spring MVC or with Spring Webflux? Spring MVC is winning. I think Ray's happy about that one too. We did find some issues with Webflux, but we will show you how to do both. So you could easily take the app we do and make it reactive. Framework for the UI. Oh, it looks like a tie between Angular and Vue. So we're going to need someone to go in there and add another choice, and then we'll come back to that one. Should we build a progressive web app or a mobile app? Okay, PWA it is. And now back to the presentation.
Not bad, not bad. I think the only thing I'm personally worried about is Maven versus Gradle. So I need to go download Gradle now.
Right. So we did want to let you know that JHipster has a concept of blueprints, and blueprints allow you to basically override the default app that's generated. So with Quarkus and .NET and Micronaut, they basically override the backend, right? They override the server-side code. So you know, this is how you install them, and if you use them, you just type JHipster and then -- blueprints for whatever blueprint you want to use. So you have to install them first, and then the authentication type. We did give you the choice, and you did choose the right one because we weren't really going to do JWT or session, even if you chose it. So OAuth, you know, my company provides identity, and OAuth is one of the ways we do that. JWT works as well. The only thing I would caution you with is with JWT, it does store the access token on the client. So if you have any third-party scripts that could get that access token, that's not good. So make sure and lock stuff down. We do have a content security policy that does that for you, so it shouldn't be an issue. Session authentication doesn't work in a microservices environment, so it's not even a choice. So good choice there. MySQL, Postgres, Neo4j, or MongoDB. Do you want to take this one just to talk about them a little, Ray?
Yeah, sure. So, well, unfortunately, the survey let you choose all of them. So, I think we're going to probably, based on our experiences, most people have been choosing Postgres, and for NoSQL, maybe MongoDB. So MySQL, I think a lot of people knows from, you know, it's been around for a long time, and for some reason, Postgres has been gaining a lot of traction in the RDBMS backend, which is really, really interesting. Last year when we did the talk, overwhelmingly more people chose Postgres SQL as well. And in addition to relational databases, JHipster also supports different NoSQL database as well. So there are two different support there, Neo4j and MongoDB. In addition to this, which is on the slide, it also supports full text search with Elasticsearch. Right. So in case you want to add full text search capabilities, JHipster can also add Elasticsearch to it too. So for the purpose of this presentation, I don't know. I think Postgres worked pretty well, and MongoDB worked pretty well too. So either one of those might be.
Yeah, there were some issues we found with 7 and Neo4j, and I think the upgrade to Spring Boot 2.4 fixes a fair amount of those. So the next beta release of JHipster 7 should have better support for Neo4j. The other thing to mention is if you are generating a reactive microservices architecture and you're using MySQL or Postgres, or even if you're doing a regular, you know, monolith, that does use R2DBC, which is a reactive project for talking to relational databases. I also noticed that Hibernate now has a reactive version. So a lot going on in that space. It's all pretty new. The R2DBC implementation that we have in JHipster is brand new in 7, and there's a lot in there. So it's almost like the person who wrote it had to rewrite like a whole mapping framework. So you know, sticking to the regular stuff that Spring Data provides is what we hope to do for this. Do you want to talk a little bit about these two options there, Ray?
I think you can take that. Yeah.
Okay, so you know, Spring MVC or Webflux. Usually when we do this in person, you know, we're describing the options and then people choose. Everyone chose Spring MVC. We do have Webflux support in JHipster. When we did this a year ago, we didn't. So I've been working a fair amount on that. Works really well. Basically, the idea is if you have super high traffic or you're dealing with a lot of streaming data, then you might want to look into Spring Webflux. And if you're just doing CRUD apps, which JHipster is very good at, then maybe you don't really need it. There was a study done where basically they created 2 different applications using both and did a bunch of performance tests, and Spring Webflux wasn't faster for a CRUD app. So if you're doing streaming data or have a lot of data, basically if you are handling more than 500 requests per second and you're experiencing load problems, then Spring Webflux will probably help you out a fair amount there. The difference is the whole programming model is quite a bit different, so you have to learn mono and flux and all that. But if you have those scaling problems, then it'll probably help you and save you a bunch of money. Angular Reactor View. Let's go back to our thing here and see if we have any new responses. Otherwise, we'll just pick one. No, we're still at still tied. So I'll go Angular, right? Because everyone tests that one. Vue, we have been doing a few tests, and yes, we could use it, but we would have to switch to the main branch because Ray and I and a few other folks have fixed stuff. So, wait for the next beta, JHipster for Vue. Only in microservices. In Monolith, it works great. With microservices, I found that like the alerts weren't translated correctly, so I don't want to make a demo that looks bad. But just to compare them a bit, jobs on Indeed, Angular used to be leading here a year ago. Now React is up, so there's a lot of people looking for people that know those technologies. Vue certainly growing, but not as much as the rest. Stack Overflow tags, React is also past Angular. Both of those have an incredible amount of tags, even Vue does as well. And I think if we added JHipster, you would see that these frameworks are super popular. So it's like choosing a Bugatti and a Lamborghini and Ferrari. Like you're going to be happy probably with any of them. If we look at Google Trends, you can see that React more popular. People are searching for it more, but Vue is certainly gaining on Angular, and currently it's head of it. So PWA or mobile, we talked about this. JHipster does support generating mobile apps, but you chose a PWA, so we'll go with that. And if you chose mobile, then we'd be done. But yes to PWA just means you have to basically go into the gateway or into the monolith and go into that source main web app directory and uncomment this line. This loads up a service worker. It will only be generated when you run in prod mode. So if you're running in development, it won't generate it, because how service workers and PWA works is it caches requests so you can work offline. So in a development environment, you probably don't want anything cached. That's a real pain, and it'll just annoy you. Also requires HTTPS, so you'll need something like this in your security configuration to redirect and force HTTPS. There's a blog post at the bottom that explains a bit more about that. But this configuration right here is typically used, or what you need for cloud providers, because they send this header that says, hey, keep what came in. And if you're using Heroku or Cloud Foundry, you need a configuration like that. If you did want to create a mobile app, we do support Ionic. So there's a module for Ionic you can use. You can see how to install it there and then run it. And there's a link to the GitHub repo. And then React Native as well. So Ignite is a really nice project for creating React apps and having kind of like JHipster, like everything in there for you. And Ignite JHipster does all that as well. So you can install the Ignite CLI, install the blueprint, and then create an app with it, and works great. I've used it a few times and really like it. So there are some pre-built samples with JDL, and usually in person we give you the option, but this one was kind of tough to coordinate. So 21 Points Health is a monolith that I wrote for the JHipster book. Basically allows you to track your health, whether you're eating right, whether you're exercising, whether you're consuming less alcohol, and then a blog, and then a bug tracker. In microservices, there's an online e-commerce store and a blog and a store. And basically when we did this in person, everyone always chose the blog and the store. So we'll go with that one today. If you want to see more, go to JDL samples there. And now we'll go ahead and get started with the demo. I'll show you just some things on start.jhipster.tech, and then I'll talk a bit about JDL, and then we'll go ahead and create the stack here. Let me get out of this window.
And just to update on the survey result, some options has changed. So yeah, so Maven is taking the lead now. So I think we're safe. We get to use Maven.
Okay, well, I'll go back into those as soon as I look at start.jhipster.tech. So similar to start spring.io, we created a JHipster online that allows you to sign in. I don't know any of my passwords here, so I got to use one password. And then once you sign in, you can actually create an application right here. So you can see I have GitHub already configured for my account. I could choose, Raible, my personal account, and then, create application name and repository name. And these are all the choices that JHipster gives you. So I won't go through this, especially since we're creating, microservices. It would be tedious to do each one, this way. But that's kind of the expectations, is you separate them and put them in individual repos. I like to do my microservices in a mono repo. You might have different ideas. Designing entities, this is JDL. This is a way that you can actually JDL stands for JHipster domain language. It allows you to model what your application looks like. So if you were to look at, a blog one, for instance, you can see these are just entities. So blog, an entry, a tag, and establish relationships between them, which is very nice. I was always confused with JPAs like many-to-one, one-to-many, and how to use those. So this simplifies that and makes it, very easy to use. There's also a few other fun things in here. For instance, statistics. You can go and see in the last 24 hours, how many apps were generated. You can also see Angular versus React. Right, looks like a lot more Angular. That's the default, so it's kind of expected. Maven versus Gradle. Again, Maven's a default, so more of that in there. And then you could play around with that if you want to see more things. The one thing I recently discovered is this is pretty neat. Continuous integration. You can actually pull in an existing project. If I had one like this, I could pull it in, and if it's a JHipster project, it'll add, CI/CD for you. So that's pretty slick, and you can configure, the different CI system you want to use. So I have everything locally here, and we have this Choose JHipster project that Ray and I have been working on. I hope that's in the wrong directory. Dev Choose JHipster. Gotta like the Xcode is doing something in the background there. So here's where we are, and we're gonna remove everything because we want to start from scratch. Gateway and store, and then if we open up this apps.jdl, let's have a look at it. I'll bump the font up a bit. So we're doing new microservices, right? That was a choice. And then Maven or Gradle. Did you go in there and make it Maven there?
It wasn't me. It wasn't me. It just grew by itself.
Right. So we're gonna. So how JDL works is there's actually a whole bunch of options here. If you were to look at here, it shows you all the various options and the things that you can override. I think down at the bottom here. So the application type, the build tool, and if it's a default, you don't actually need to do anything. So we can take out the client framework since we're going to use Angular. Reactive true is false since we're not going to use that. Auth 2, we'll go ahead and use Postgres for this one. And Cypress is supported as well as Protractor for doing testing. You can also do Gatling tests, and it'll generate those for you. So we're just going to keep with that. We'll take out the reactive there, Auth 2, Mongo, and then take out this one, the store, and we'll use Mongo here as well. I think for this, we can actually use MySQL. So you only need to specify SQL there. MariaDB is supported as well, but I haven't played with that, so I don't want to risk it. And then all the entities are defined down here. So this is our apps.jdl. Go back here and clear it. And then you just type JHipster, JDL, apps.jdl, and it'll generate everything for you. So before you do that, if you haven't installed JHipster, you'll need Node, and you can do npmi-g generator-jhipster to use the beta version that we're using. Just do @beta. And the reason I'm doing this is because we have been playing with the main branch on JHipster, and so I want to make sure I'm using the actual, released version of the beta instead of somehow using the main branch by mistake. And then once that's done, I'll get my next command going here. So this is dev choose JHipster, and it'll be JHipster. JDL is the companion. It's a shortcut for import JDL, and then apps, and then skip install. The reason I'm going to do the skip install is because it does an npm install by default, but we're going to run everything from Maven, so we don't really need to install that stuff. We can just have it create everything via Java. So it creates a whole bunch of files, and it'll create 3 separate directories. And one thing to be aware of is if this wasn't a Git repository, it would commit each of those directories, and it would create a .git directory in each directory. So if you were to go to the top level and try to add them all, it's going to create like whatever that GitHub does, so don't do that. So we'll just get everything going here. So in the store app, there's a few different Docker containers we'll need to start. So you can look in source main Docker for each one and see what's involved. So we're going to need MongoDB. I have a shortcut for that. So Mongo up. And then I'll see if I
have a short question at some point from the chat. So whenever you're ready, or whenever you see me appearing on the screen, you know what's going to happen. So
yeah,
go ahead
and ask. I'm just going to start these Docker containers. So.
All right, perfect. Then it's perfect timing then. So there is a question if there are any tools that you can use to point your database and generate the JDL entities.
Yes, there is. I don't know the repo, but it's like JHipster SQL blueprint or something like that. Let me look for it. JHipster SQL.
Right. Perfect.
To JDL. Yeah, SQL to JDL here. So this will take your existing database and create JDL for it. So check that out.
All right. Thank you very much.
But you know, it looks like 4 days ago it was updated, so that's good. So blog is just using MySQL, and then for the gateway, first of all, we'll need to start Keycloak since we're using OAuth. Nothing will actually start if you don't have Keycloak up because it does do a lookup of the endpoints for OAuth from the issuer, and that's configured in JHipster. And then source main Docker. We also need the registry. This is Eureka from Spring Cloud to do service discovery and mapping between the services. And then we'll also need JH Postgres for running in prod. It looks like, I have this problem where I got this little Postgres thing here that's already running, so I need to quit that. And then the Docker container should start up. And then we also want to turn this into a PWA, right, instead of an app or a mobile app. So source main web index, like I talked about, search for service worker or service. PWA. Well, go down and look for it here. Somewhere at the bottom. Oh, it's not in there. Well, it was last time I generated, so it looks like we got a bug there. So can't do a PWA, but should be able to. And then we'll just start all these. So we'll do mvn-p prod here for the gateway and then the blog. Running out Maven again. And into the store and run that one as well. And so at least this time we're actually showing you everything running. The first time Ray and I did this, we encountered so many issues that we never showed a working app until 90 minutes into it. So I do have another app I could show you if this failed for any reason, but I'm pretty confident it'll all work. And I can show you how everything communicates with each other. So, things are starting up. The two microservices start faster because the front end up here for the gateway actually does an npm install and makes the front end work. Now, one thing to note is how JHipster is currently configured. The UI is on the gateway, and so really it becomes a monolithic UI, which isn't great for a microservices architecture because if you changed one of the backend things and you need to update the UI for it, then you have to actually redeploy both the microservice and the gateway, which shouldn't be required. So we are exploring micro front ends architecture where the UI would actually sit in the microservice and the gateway would pull it in, and then they could be deployed independently. So that's module federation. It's part of Webpack 5. And we just need to migrate to Webpack 5, and then we can embrace it and use it and change JHipster. So it prompts you to say, do you want to use, micro front ends? And maybe we'll even make it the default because a monolith UI kind of defeats the purpose of microservices. But from what I know, a lot of people that use JHipster and its microservices stuff don't have a UI, right? They're just generating the backends. They're not so worried about the front end. So that's why it's not so much of an issue. And you'll notice even here, we're using Angular CLI. That's new in JHipster 7, so we use it to do builds, and I believe you could even run ng-serve like in the app, and it would all work. So good work to the folks that have done that. And we can also look at the registry, so that's at localhost 8761, just like you would if you're doing, regular Spring. And it redirects to Keycloak to log in. And you'll see we have blog and store, but we don't have gateway up. Now, one thing I wanted to show you is that up here in the URL, it does have Keycloak 9080. So most of the times when you're running in Docker, the apps can communicate with each other and they use a symbolic name like Keycloak. In this instance, what we require you to do is actually modify your host file to add Keycloak and point it to 127.0.0.1. So you do need to do that or else you'll get an error. And that's because when in Docker, it needs to do something. It just can't say localhost. So we'll go back and log in again and see if the gateway's up. Nope, still starting. So I think it's funny that, TypeScript and compiling the front end now takes longer than compiling the back end. So that's all we're seeing here. If I had done it, it would have started, much faster, but looks like it might be up now. Not quite. Now, we have 204. There we go. So not only does the JHipster registry allow you to actually look at the metrics for the registry itself, but you can also look at the individual applications. So there's a bug. Never mind. Don't look at that. We'll just go to localhost 8080 and log into the gateway here. And admin again. You can see we're logged in. And then if we were to look at tags, this is something that we use called Faker.js to populate it with default data. So as a developer, you don't actually have to enter data to do stuff with it. Makes it nice. So this product is talking to the backend, right, that runs the store. So this is the MongoDB backend. We can delete it. We could add a new one. I like beer, and it is the afternoon. We'll make it expensive like Sweden. And then we'll go into our pictures here and add a beer real quick. I got an icon here somewhere. There we go. And so you can see that's working. It's storing images in the database, and our blog's working as well. Since we were able to delete one, we can go in here and edit one, and you'll see it saved. So all that's working. Now what I wanted to do is show you how to switch to Okta, because I think that's a pretty neat way of doing things. And if you go to production, you might not want to manage, Keycloak in production. So we'll stop the gateway here. We'll keep those Docker containers going. We can stop Keycloak. So JH Keycloak down. These are just shortcuts I have for OMyZSH. And then in the gateway, we'll go ahead and run. I have the Okta CLI installed. You can get that from cli.okta.com. And so I can do Okta apps create. We'll call it JHipster MS. And what type of application? A web application. And JHipster is built in, option number 3. And it even has the redirect URIs that it expects you to use and the logout redirect URI. And so it'll create all that for you. It'll go ahead and create a groups claim that's added to the ID token. So whatever groups you have on Okta are read by Spring Security and configured accordingly. So JHipster expects a role user and a role admin by default, and it writes it to this okta.env file. So if we were to look at that, you can see that it has those settings in there. So one of the cool things is if we were to go into JHipster registry, we could configure those settings to be the settings that all of the microservices use in one central location. So we don't actually need to configure each individual one to use those settings. Now you could put them into, your application.yml, but part of the problem is there's secrets in here, right? This secret should never be put into source control. And I will delete this app, when this presentation's over. So you got like 10 minutes that you can use that client ID and client secret. So going back to our code, if we were to go into the JHipster registry is where Spring Cloud Config is configured, and we use a Docker container for that. So I will need to go into that directory where it's created and modify some files to use those properties that we're setting from Okta instead of using the default. So if we go into the gateway here, we go into source main Docker, the central config server is where the everything is configured for Spring Cloud Config. And if we were to go into this config directory, we can grab the stuff or the properties we need for Spring Security and OAuth. So they're down right here. then if we go here, we'll type Spring. So this is what gives all the other applications their security that they'll need, and then we can copy these in there. So the client ID, come on, client secret, and then the issuer, and this is where it looks up all the endpoints that are used for OAuth. And the cool thing is here, we haven't changed any code, right? Everything in JHipster is just Spring Security, and all of this stuff just configures it to talk to a different IDP. And then the other thing we need to change is in here, it's got these hard-coded, right? So one thing that you can do is you could change these to be properties and then read from a .env file. I'm just going to make it easy and do the same things we did, just copy them right in there. And this will make it so the registry actually uses OAuth as well. So if you didn't want it to do it, then you could just leave these and it would use Keycloak, and that would work as well. So now we can go and start everything again. So we're in the gateway, JH registry, make sure that's down. Come on, you want to go down. Docker PS. Okay, so it's down, and then we can do JH registry up. And so this will fail if you don't have Keycloak running. In this instance, we configured it to use Okta. So if for some reason Okta's down or your internet's down, then the app will fail to start. So I do like to check and see if things are up and running. Looks like it's working. So then we go into the gateway, and we can just run MVN here. Into the blog, run MVN there, and into the store. Run it there as well. And then make sure that our registry is still up. Looks like it, so we can exit out of there. And the next time, it needs to run npm install for that front end, should be a little faster. And you can see it skipped over it because we didn't change any front end code. But yeah, we're still waiting. Come on, Webpack. Like someday, can't the front end stuff compile faster than Java? You would think so. Hopefully, maybe TypeScript's native someday and just things are faster. I don't know. But you can see these started, so that's a good sign. Let's check our registry.
I can jump in while your code is building. There was another question. Do you have the code or whatever you're creating, or in one way or another, available on GitHub?
Yep, we're about to do that. So you'll notice I did log in with JHipster Okta right there. So GitHub is going to be github.com, Raible, choose JHipster. And so I haven't pushed the code that we're using right now. You'll see there is one in here. This is just what Ray and I were playing with before, because we did find that Neo4j, there's no template for Kubernetes. So that's why we switched to MongoDB. But our choices are a little bit different in here. If you look at this, apps.jdl does have reactive and things like that in there. So I will push shortly after we confirm everything's working up there, and then Ray will take it from there. So if we were to go back to localhost 8080 here, we can sign in, and you'll notice instead of going to Keycloak, we went to Okta, right? It would say admin if we were, just signed in with Keycloak. And so the cool thing is I didn't even need to sign in because I already signed into the registry. So that's the beauty of single sign-on. And of course, all of our products and everything back here is still available. So close everything there. And I could run the Cypress test. Those are pretty neat. npm run e2e. I didn't do it here just, for the interest of time, because they do take a couple of minutes to run. So we can go back and see how we're doing. Add everything. Champions Conference. And then it runs Prettier to format everything. So that's pretty nice. You don't have to worry about formatting. If you want to adjust how Prettier does that, you can certainly go in and tweak those files. So now we'll go back to the presentation, I believe, before I turn it over to Ray, because I wanted to talk about a few other things. So slides. Oh, I'm in the wrong one. Here we go. One of the things I wanted to talk about is the high quality code by default. This is an example that I just created yesterday. Healthy Hipster uses at 21 points JDL, which I use to track my health, and others can too. You can see all the protractor tests pass on the left. And then up on the top is the sonar report. There's no bugs, no vulnerabilities, no code smells. I'm not sure what the hotspots reviewed is. That's a new one that I wasn't aware of until yesterday. So there's a issue I entered to figure out how to make that not error. Performance, this is a React app for the front end. And in JHipster 6, the performance was 100, so I'm not sure why it's 76. But the other ones are just as good as they were with JHipster 6, so we might need to tweak the performance a bit. And I was able to make that into progressive web app, no problem. So like I said, there is an issue with Angular that we saw that it didn't have that service worker in the index, so we need to fix that. And then I'll turn it over to Ray to talk about where to deploy this thing.
All right, Rustam, can you switch over to my screen? All right, I think that's mine. Thank you very much. Wow, that's a lot of choices, and the application was just generated in the past couple of minutes. That's a little scary for me because this is where Matt checking his code, and then I get to deploy it, and I'll get to find out whether everything works or not in the production environment. Now, JHipster does have many deployment choices in the website. If you go under production deployment, here is a snapshot of all the environments you can deploy the application to. It supports many different clouds, and my particular interest, of course, will be Google Cloud Platform. But I also helped create the generator for Kubernetes initially, as well as the generator for Google Cloud Platform. So if you deploy the app to Google Cloud Platform, you can deploy it into Kubernetes using the Kubernetes generator, or you can deploy it into App Engine, our platform as a service, where you can just run the jar file and we'll just spin up all the infrastructure for you. Now, for today, we're going to be using Kubernetes to deploy our app because I think more or less that's where a lot of the interests are for the past couple of years. And if we were to give you a choice, I think a lot of people would choose this as well. So a very quick overview of Kubernetes. It was created by Google in 2014. It's been 6 years now. It's been a long time, and we're seeing wide adoption right in the enterprise and everywhere else. And it is at its heart a container orchestration tool. So forget about SSH into individual machines and configure the VM yourself and creating all the environments manually. With Kubernetes, you can have the entire cluster of machine to be under control by the Kubernetes control plan. And when you deploy a container, Kubernetes will automatically decide on which machine to deploy the container into and watch for the health of that application so that in case the application fails, it can automatically start it. And it is now managed by the Cloud Native Foundations, right? And to use Kubernetes, so you do have to generate or write a lot of the Kubernetes specific configurations, usually written in forms of the YAML file. So if you want to see Kubernetes, yourself, you'll end up writing a lot of YAML files, and you're not just a Java developer anymore. Soon enough, you'll be a YAML developer. But that is okay because JHipster will generate all the YAMLs for you, and that's what I'm gonna show. So I have the files checked out right now. So this is exactly what the Matt has created earlier. If I open the apps GDL, you can see all the choices that you have made. There's no reactive, it's Postgres and MySQL down here. We're using Maven by default, right? And so on and so forth. So to deploy this into Kubernetes, I already have a Kubernetes cluster running. Now, if you want to run Kubernetes locally, you may choose something like Minikube or Docker for desktop with Kubernetes enabled. However, whenever you do this, make sure that you also try to increase the amount of memory and CPU that you allocate to the virtual machine so that you can actually run all of these applications. These are pretty heavy duty applications that you will end up using a lot of CPUs and memory. Not only that, because you're also going to be running MySQL and Postgres and Elasticsearch if you turn that on, right? So you're going to be running a lot of stuff. So make sure you are using a pretty sizable local instance. For me, however, I'm going to be running this on my Google Cloud Platform, GKE cluster, the Google Kubernetes Engine cluster. I have everything configured already, but in case you're wondering how to create one, you just go to Google Cloud Platform console and go to Kubernetes Engine and click a button. Just make sure you give it more memory and CPU. Click of a button, it will provision everything for you. Okay, so I have everything provisioned. So now I just need to create the YAML files. Now, rather than doing this manually line by line, I'm going to use JHipster for it. So first, what I'm going to do is to create a directory. This is where I'm going to hold all of the YAML files. And to generate the YAML file, all I need to do is to say JHipster Kubernetes. And the first question it's going to ask is where are all of your applications and what type of application are they? So in this case, we'll choose microservices. And all of the application is in the directory above me, right? Because I created the KAS directory and everything's above me. So in this case, I'm going to say ... to go one level up. And then it will automatically discover all of the microservices that Matt has already generated. So blog, gateway, and store, that's what we have. So I can select all the stuff I want to generate and deploy into Kubernetes. And it's going to ask you a lot of questions like, do you want metrics? Do you want to enable Prometheus? You can say yes or no. For simplicity, I'm going to say no. For the databases, you can create a cluster database. So in case you're using MongoDB or Couchbase, rather than running just a single instance of Couchbase or MongoDB in a single node, with the cluster option, it will actually create in Kubernetes what we call a stateful set, so that you can actually automatically scale out to different number of nodes, so that maybe beginning you can have MongoDB with one node, and then you can scale the deployment out to 2 nodes or 3 nodes, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to say yes to that. The JHipster admin password is what the application is going to use to connect to the registry. That's okay. I'll use something by default. In Kubernetes, there's a concept of namespaces. So in a single cluster, maybe you have hundreds of machines. But if you have a flat hierarchy with just a single view, you're going to be looking at thousands of applications running in that space, right? So Kubernetes has done something pretty awesome, which is to carve out these spaces into namespaces. So for example, you can say, I want to deploy this into the staging environment, or maybe this is the blog staging environment instead. So you can name the namespaces. By default, the default place to go is just default. So I'm going to put it there. All the container images that you have just created, it's probably best that when you deploy to production environment, you need to push them to a registry. Okay, I think prior to this year, a lot of people use Docker Hub, right? But obviously, I think there are some new policy changes. So if you want to avoid some of the the pull rates or any limiting of the pull downloads and stuff, maybe you want to use a private registry. On Google Cloud, we have what we call GCR, which is a Google Cloud registry. And that's what I'm going to use. So I can push all of my container images into this Google Cloud registry without me having to manage any of the backend infrastructure that can hold all of these images. So what that means is that you can basically push as many images as you want. You don't have to worry about the space. You don't have to manage anything. You just push it and it will hold it for you. And so this is the registry name that I'm going to use. I hope I got it right. And I'm going to use Docker push to push. Now, one really interesting feature of this generator is that it can actually generate not just the vanilla Kubernetes files, it can also generate Helm charts and generate it for OpenShift. But in this case, for this particular question, this is asking you whether you want to generate it for Istio. Okay, so Istio is a service mesh that can potentially help you to offload a lot of the network connections and load balancing from your application to the service mesh, right? So a lot of people are probably using like Spring Cloud and using Eureka and client-side load balancer to load balance all the requests for you in the application. With Istio and the service mesh, you can actually offload the load balancing to ECDO service mesh instead. So when you make a request, you'll just need to make a request to a endpoint, and ECDO will intercept that request and perform the load balancing for you based on the policy that you configured for the cluster. So you can decouple the load balancing and service communication policies from your application. This is really, really cool. In addition to load balancing, you can also perform retries. So in case that you're implementing some circuit breaker in your own application, you can also configure ECDO to do the circuit breaking and retries for you instead of you writing that into your application. Most importantly, I think this is probably the most important feature for the enterprise, which is MTLS connections. So rather than having you to manage your own certificates and establishing MTLS connections between your microservices, you can simply turn it on in ECDO, and your application, when they are speaking over REST over HTTP, it will automatically be MTLS encrypted, and you don't have to worry about certificates or anything like that, because ECDO will provision all of those things for you. Okay, so these are just some of the side benefits of ECDO in addition to being able to load balance your services for you. Okay, so unfortunately, we didn't ask this question in the survey, but I'm gonna take the liberty here and say no for now, just because it will be a little bit easier and straightforward. Finally, when we deploy the applications, we want the application to be accessible from the external users. And here we have three different choices to be able to expose your application to the internet, in this case, on the cloud. So we can expose it as a simple L4 load balancer. This will be a network load balancer. Or we can expose it as an ingress, which will be a full L7 globally available HTTP load balancer. Okay. On Google Cloud, the L4 load balancer is regional. It's a network load balancer. But our ingress is actually globally available HTTP load balancer. So it will be the L7 load balancer. Okay. Or if you want to front it with your own load balancer, then you can choose no port, which will make a port available on each individual machine within the Kubernetes cluster. And then you can front it with whatever that you want. For this demo, we're going to choose the load balancer, just a regular simple load balancer instead. Okay. And finally, for all the storage, like for the database, we have the option to dynamically provision the storage for you. So this works with the cloud providers. So you can dynamically provision more disks, for example, and connect, configure MongoDB to use those disks. All right. So now we're generating all the files. Okay, so everything's being generated. You might ask how much has been generated. Here are all the YAML files, and I'm just gonna open one up very quickly. Because I also have to edit some of them as well. So this is a fully generated deployment YAML file for Kubernetes deployment. As you can see, there is a lot of best practices put in here. For example, pod anti-affinity, so that the application is deployed, spread across multiple machines, so that there's not a single point of failure in the machine. If you scroll down a little bit, here's all the environmental variable that can use to configure your application. Your database password, for example, will be referenced from a secret. It will be storing a secret within Kubernetes, and so on and so forth. But the one thing I do need to configure is the Okta's OAuth 2 configuration. I also have it ready somewhere, so I'm going to paste this in. So remember how Matt had to configure the Spring Cloud config stuff? With the Kubernetes manifest, you can just configure the environmental variable directly. So I'm going to go ahead and modify the deployment files. And I can scroll down here and find the environmental variables. And I'm going to paste in the envars that will help me to connect to Okta for authentication. Okay, so this is the OIDC client, the secret, the URI, and the client ID. I'm going to save that. And I need to do this for every single one of these deployments. So I'm going to copy and paste that. And finally, the last one. Okay. So that will complete our YAML file, specifically also adding the capability to use OIDC Connect with Okta. Before I deploy everything, I have to make sure that all of the container images are pushed. When I generated this YAML, all the YAML files, here's the important information here, which is to actually build a production container image. So I have to run this command on all of the services to produce this container image. Now, one thing that you will notice is that this is actually using JHipster to build the container image. So we're not using any Docker files in JHipster for these applications. There's no Docker file necessary. We can simply use JHipster. JHipster is a tool that was created by Google as well, and it will create the best container image automatically with best practices without you having to write a single line of Docker file. And this command right here is basically to tell JHipster where to push the container to. So this is the container registry that I previously specified. Now, all of these things can work actually without having Docker on your own machine, because JHipster will push the container images directly to a remote container registry. You don't need Docker locally to do this. Okay, so I'm gonna just do that very quickly. So I'm gonna go into blog. Now, because of the time, rather than doing a verify, which will take a while, I'm just going to do a build and skip test, assuming Matt already tested everything, right? Right, Matt? Everything's fine?
I did. I did.
Yeah.
While you were doing this, I ran that command with verify in there, and they all did pass. So
Perfect. Yeah, so if it doesn't work, then it's my fault. That's what you're trying to say.
I'm saying you didn't update.
Yeah.
This would be the test. Did Ray really use the same code that I did?
Yeah, exactly. So here's the store, and let me see here. I need to create another one, which is the gateway, isn't it? Moment of truth. CD gateway and gateway. Okay. Now notice how fast the build actually took place. Now, when Matt checking his code, I actually built some stuff behind the scenes. But with JHipster, when we're building that container image, if nothing has changed in the code, it doesn't actually recreate the container for you. And so because I didn't change what Matt has created, it just pushed really, really quickly to the registry. Okay, which is one of the benefits of using JHipster. We don't have to continuously push gigabytes of data over the internet. In this case, it will only push out the differentials in a way. Okay. Whew. So now everything's pushed. We configured all the environmental variables, and if I go back up to the generator output, we have a convenience command here that will help you to deploy everything into Kubernetes. Just very quickly, if I open up the file, basically what this will do is to go into all the directories and then do a kubectl apply for all of the applications that we created. All right. And just to remind you what we're going to be deploying, we're going to deploy 3 microservices, right? The block, the store, plus the gateway, and the JHipster registry, and all the databases behind the scenes. So whether it's my PostgreSQL or MySQL, or in this case, MongoDB. All right. Enough stalling. As you can see, I'm kind of worried about this. So I'm going to go ahead and run this kubeapply-f. And there we go. Okay, so it's actually doing the deployment right now. And I actually tried this out slightly earlier, so it seems like I haven't really changed much from our previous deployment. But this is where you apply all of the YAML files into the Kubernetes cluster, and we can just wait for everything to deploy. Once everything's deployed, we can see the application on the service, which is this one. Remember that we initially chose the load balancing to use a load balancer. So this is a load balancer, and it has an external IP address, and it's going to be listening on port 8080. Before everything can work, though, I also have to make sure that this IP address is added to Okta into the single sign-on for the OAuth redirect. So I have done that also. Let me just go back to my screen real quick and put this over. Okay, so in Okta, what I can do is to make sure that we have configured the redirect URI for login and logout, and also the initiate login URL. And this all have my my IP address in there. Okay, and let's go ahead and just take a quick look to see if everything is still running. Yeah, there we go. Everything's up and running. So we should be able to, a moment of truth, to see this app. All right, this is new. Okay, that's pretty good. And I guess because I logged in previously, and you can see that I'm really logged in here. But I can sign out. I can sign out right now. And let me go ahead and log in again. And because this is using Okta behind the scenes, so it's asking for the password. And I will grab the password and paste it in. Very cool. Very cool. All right. So we just took what Matt has created. We generated the Kubernetes YAML files. We deployed it into Kubernetes. Of course, we configured the Okta authentication. And now everything's up and running. And I should be able to go to one of these entities that has been previously created. And moment of truth, let's create a new blog like, hello, J Champions. And Stalinism, that's my handle. And for the user, that's my email, and save. And there you go. I'm actually quite surprised everything worked. Matt, what do you think?
That's excellent. No, the last time we did it, it worked in Utah, so still works a year later, especially with JHipster 7. So how awesome is that?
That is pretty cool.
That's
pretty cool.
fantastic. That's really, really great. While you were talking, there were a few questions that popped up in the chat. So I think it's a good time to ask them now, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So the first question is JHipster kind of like a Django on steroids and in Java, of course?
Right, but you don't have to use Python. Well, I think, the difference that JHipster has really had and helped it grow is because of the blueprints, right? And the fact that you can implement a new backend if you want. I think, people probably get into it and they're like, oh, I'll do it with Micronaut or I'll do it with Node.js. And then they realize how much there is in the default implementation. So I think there has been interest in like a Go implementation and a Python implementation, but I think, it's a lot of work. So, stuff to do yourself.
That's really, really cool. That's great. Okay. Another question is about Kubernetes. So the Kubernetes running locally, are there any open issues with running it on new MacBook M1 machines? Do you know of any issues with that?
Yeah, I heard that there are some things that they're still working on. I don't have an M1 myself, but right, Docker itself uses the VM, and you have to kind of wait for it to support the M1. I think they're working on that last time I checked. But in addition, though, is that the virtualization is for ARM processor, if I recall correctly. So the Docker container itself may have to run with ARM JVM, for example, rather than x86 JVM. But I think because M1 is so new, this is all being worked out. Do you have an M1, Matt? Is that what you're using?
No, my daughter has one, but she doesn't run Kubernetes.
Yet, right?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Go on with the presentation now. Now you can continue.
Okay. Well, I think that was the end of our adventure, isn't it, Matt?
No, there's a couple more.
Yeah. Okay.
There's one more. Next.
That
Action.
one. That one.
To try JHipster 7. Do like Ray and I did and find the bugs. We did find a bunch recently, but there could be more. So try your favorite combinations. Maybe take what we have as that JDL and change it to some other combinations and see if that works for you. And you can always watch the video here on YouTube and follow the same steps for the different combinations. And then I had one last slide there, Ray.
Yeah, there we go.
So if you want to keep in touch, hit us up on Twitter. That's usually the best way. We both have our direct messages open. If we don't see them right away, it's probably because Twitter says you have ones that you haven't approved, but we will eventually get to them. Presentation is there on Speaker Deck. I just uploaded it, so if you go to that URL, you'll see it in the top left-hand corner. And the code is at github.com/mraible, and I did update that as well. So it now has a /choosejhipster, which is the code we created in this presentation. So I'm assuming, Ray, you will check in like your code for Kubernetes in there?
Yeah, absolutely. I will do that and push it to the repository.
Cool. So thank you all for coming and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for doing this. This has been really, really great and great talk. And there is a lot of comments. I don't know, you probably don't see the comments yet, but you'll see them later. But there is a lot of comments saying thank you, and it was a great talk. And I'll just say +1 to that. I think. Thank you very much for doing that, and thank you for all of you on the stream joining in. So you, you know. Look into the schedule. There will be more talks today, and there will be more talks tomorrow, and there will be 2 more days with talks, and all of the talks have their own YouTube links, just so you know that. Small reminder. So go to the schedule on the website jchampionsconf.com and schedule, and you'll see all the links there.
Well, I forgot to share my T-shirt. Check out this cool new T-shirt. I fight for the users.
Wait. I'll make you bigger. No, I made myself bigger. That doesn't make. Yeah, there you go. Nice. Very nice.
That's the new Octa one we got. If you want one, hit me up.
Awesome.
Yeah, right.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Cheers.